Right? You're not winning your draft because you took Jonathan Taylor. Everybody's got Jonathan Taylor. All right, but how are you getting different? How are you getting unique in your rosters? One way is through correlations and ADP reaches and stuff like that we've talked about in the past. But another way is by finding players that aren't getting drafted 100% of the time. Ownership leverage goes back to DFS, which ultimately a lot of these best ball tournaments are small field DFS tournaments by the end of the year. So by finding these guys that are low ownership, that aren't popular, that aren't being drafted in every draft, you can get unique teams. So we've picked a couple of guys that we wanted to talk about. This is the second time we've done this show. The two that I picked last time, I stand by, and I'm still drafting, but I wanted to pick some different guys. But I will say Terrace Marshall and Dearness Johnson are the two that I talked about on the last episode. If you want to hear the explanation on those guys, and I do stand by them. But who's somebody right now in the end of June, beginning of July, that is a late round target for you in best ball?
And my first player that I think you should be taking some dart throws on in the later rounds, obviously in Best Ball Mania, there's only 18, but in Superflex and on Drafters and DraftKings, there's 20 rounds. So you could definitely take a shot on Mike Davis. Mike Davis is currently going as the RB84 on Underdog at an ADP of 215.8, so the second to last pick of the 18th round. And I just think that Mike Davis is a solid long shot buy in fantasy, especially on a site like Underdog where receptions aren't valued as much, strictly because of the running back situation in Baltimore. Okay, so J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are both coming off torn ACLs from last year, obviously. Both of them happened in the preseason. So the assumption would be that they would both be ready to go for the start of 2022. But it may not be that simple. I think that there could be a good chance that both of them aren't ready for week one. And there's a good chance that both of them could end up on the PUP list, which would make them miss 4 games instead of 6 because they changed the rules this year, if you didn't know. With J.K. Dobbins, his ACL injury, obviously, 9 to 11 month recovery, but there was also some LCL damage, and that was very similar to Saquon's injury. And we saw Saquon come back last year and not be effective at all. So I think the timetable for J.K. Dobbins is a little bit longer than Gus Edwards. And I think that Gus Edwards definitely has a higher chance of being ready for week one than J.K. Dobbins. But some fantasy doctors across the fantasy football space have speculated that they don't believe either one of them will be ready. So that would essentially leave Mike Davis as the running back 1 on the depth chart. Obviously, he's not the running back 1 on the team because that's Lamar Jackson. But he should still be in line for, I think, some significant opportunity if these two guys weren't able to go. And, just 2 years ago, he showed that he does have some upside in fantasy. Obviously, last year he busted. But it's all about cost, right? It's all about cost in fantasy football. We came on this pod pretty much a year ago to the month, and we said Mike Davis was the easiest fade of the entire season. I tweeted that. I know that for a fact. Mike Davis was the easiest fade of last year going as a 4th-round pick. Now he's an 18th-round pick. Could see opportunity early in the season and make your lineup, 1, 2, or 3 times in that first month and a half of the year. And, God forbid anything goes wrong and they have setbacks, you could get him in your lineup later in the season. So I think as an 18th round pick, he has a lot of opportunity to make your lineup. And I think he's a valuable RB5 or RB6. And, it's just kind of a conversation about, can we forget about last year and maybe his lack of talent and just project what he could do for this year as a factor in that offense? And I think he will see some opportunity.